who had this notorious name called the Iron Man of Changi, who was really a very high-status criminal law detainee.
So what was the general feeling when the prisoners knew that they'll be going to this island, Texas?
Some of them were quite excited because they were told it was not going to be like a prison. It was going to be like a kind of a detention island. So they were told that they would be getting different privileges, special food, and their main task was to develop the island. I remember the first few trips, some of them came back who were sick, medical attention. They were actually saying, oh, it was very nice.
A quick look at Pulau Senang, and they know one thing for sure, there's going to be nothing Senang about it for them.
Then the reports came back and became worse to worse. And then the reports of the brutality came in and things like that. He would be there, supervising the work, shouting away, cursing, and yelling off. I guess he was the typical example of a slave driver. You either do it or you get punished. The complaints were always overruled. There was always this fear that if you did complain, unless you get off the island, you get added.
It showed his belief system that I can be nice to them. You do good, I'll reward you. But if you disobey me, I will teach you a lesson.
No.
Pulau Senang became a talking point in coffee shops, among hawkers, among trishaw riders. I believe most of them wanted such a pilot scheme to succeed. So people were shocked in Singapore. They speculated on the reasons. They spoke ill about Dutton and his colleagues, whether anger was slowly building up, and it just exploded.
There had been rumors that the detainees had worked out a hit list of those that they wanted to see punished. And this maintained Dutton as the top of that list, and then many of his guards as well.
This was a gangland murder. Gangland do not kill people at random. They will kill people who have been targeted. So these were people targeted by the gang. The crown in the jewel was Dutton. At the end of the day, what did he do to provoke people to eventually do what they did to him?
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
In June, Shanghai declared victory in its fight against COVID-19. But a harsh 2-month lockdown left the city scarred.
我要抛下我在上海的一切东西，我就无论如何我一定要离开。这个信任的缺失是很受打击的。
How China's zero-COVID role model turned into a nightmare, reliving the Great Shanghai Lockdown. Tonight on CNA.
This is Asia Now.
Good morning. It is 11 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 8:30 in New Delhi, and 10 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Chan Yu-im. Your top stories. China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang meets Myanmar's military chief. He is the highest-ranking Chinese official to sit down with the country's top general since the army coup more than 2 years ago. Beijing authorities under pressure to do more when it comes to Ukraine. The U.S. ambassador to China says they should press Russia to end its war.
I think that what we need to see from China is to push Russia to withdraw its troops.
Plus, a warning from America's Surgeon General that loneliness poses risks as deadly as smoking and costs the healthcare industry billions of dollars every year. China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang has reaffirmed support for Myanmar's development during his visit to the country. The top Chinese diplomat met with Myanmar's military leader Min Aung Hlaing to discuss the crisis in the ASEAN member country. Myanmar state media says the two discussed the political situation in the country, actions for stability, as well as increasing cross-border trade and cooperation on energy. Despite the coup and its aftermath, Beijing remains a staunch ally of Myanmar. The Chinese envoy's visit comes amid growing global frustration at the military for failing to stop the violence. In a foreign ministry statement, Mr. Qin says the international community should respect Myanmar's sovereignty and play a constructive role in helping it to achieve peace and reconciliation. Western powers and their allies have increasingly shunned and sanctioned the coup leaders for their continued crackdown on dissent. ASEAN has also voiced growing impatience at its member for failing to heed an agreed 5-point consensus, which, among other things, calls for a halt to the violence and constructive dialogue to end the crisis. Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to China says Beijing should push Russia to end its war in Ukraine. Nicholas Burns says the recent call between Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Ukrainian counterpart is a good first step. China has put forward a 12-point peace proposal that has largely been dismissed as overly vague and lacks any call for a Russian withdrawal. Mr. Burns adds that Washington is closely monitoring if Beijing is providing lethal military aid to Moscow.
We've been watching that issue very carefully now for many months. We have not seen evidence that the Chinese are doing that, but we continue to watch it. And I don't want to go into the private conversations we've had with the Chinese leadership, but they've been at the very highest levels, and we've been unmistakably clear about how serious this would be.
Mr. Burns went on to say Beijing could press Moscow to stop bombing schools, hospitals, and civilian housing.